second attempt at a video this morning. I rambled way too much in my last video, but um, I just wanted to make a video because I think I have a really unique perspective on vintage non-sport collecting in general, and I also think that I think there's some potential for other people like me to get into this space, and there are already people who already have, and but I just want to kind of talk about it a little bit because the main thing I would say is that I've noticed that it's a lot of people. There's not a lot of crossover between TCG collecting and vintage non-sports. Um, Now, I think that's actually just temporary. I think that a lot of it has to do with the age of TCG collectors. Um, a lot of them are still fairly young. I think as they get into their 40s, 50s, and 60s, they're going to end up reaching the maxed out levels of their card collecting, be it Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever other games are still surviving in, 10 years or whatever, however long it is. And it could be even sooner than that. Honestly, I hope it is. And I think that other people are definitely going to follow in my footsteps. And again, I'm not even actually the first person who's ever walked into this space like this. It's just the guy who I know is Australian. So I don't think that, any of you guys would probably really have ever encountered him. And I don't think he's also, I don't know what kind of money he spends on this stuff either. He may not spend, I doubt he spent the amount of money on one card that I have. But anyways, that's really not that important. But anyways, so a few things, I just wanted to tie, there's, for at least for me, there's multiple different things that tie into vintage non-sports from my TCG collecting. I guess also, first of all, I'm going to do a little bit of background on myself. I started playing Magic the Gathering in 1995 with my dad. By 1997, we were playing in Arena League in tournaments, which is like competitive play, and I got really super into it. I did get out of my card collecting probably around middle school, high school. Sold all my cards, which if I had kept them, I could have bought a house with. But I sold them, and it's a lot of, I guess, a lot of card collectors and adults, right? You have this regret that you lost this valuable, awesome thing that you had when you were a kid, and there's like a nostalgia for reclaiming it and stuff like that. But anyways, I restarted my card collection in like around 2005, 2006, and one summer I think I had a decent amount of money saved up, and I exposed myself to buying some $100 plus cards, and a few years later those cards were worth a lot more than I paid for them. And that as a lot of people get into buying more expensive cards, you find that that's kind of the way that you make money off of that stuff. And that I was able to build my collection from a lot of the cards that I owned, and speculating on various different Magic cards, and a cycle of buying and selling after a while. And maybe 2008 maybe when I started and getting into the true like buying and selling of Magic cards and that aspect of things. Um, but anyways, so there's a few things. Now Magic collecting, I would say, is generally speaking not very common in general. Most people who own Magic cards play Magic, and that's the main reason why they own the cards. Now, obviously, there's a bling factor now, where like people like to have expensive, shiny, rare cards in their decks. And also, Magic is now very recently becoming increasingly like sports cards. There's now serialized cards, and these extremely rare special foil printings and stuff that are very similar to modern sports cards. And actually, this year, scheduled for the release, the Star Trek set is going to have physical on-card autographs from cast members of the Star Trek shows. So it's really going to be, it's as far as like the types of cards that exist in the modern sports collecting scene, it's actually very similar. Now, obviously vintage non-sports is a little different, but you have a lot of vintage Magic players, and then you get more into the collectors. A lot of the people who own the really expensive Magic cards are more, and I don't want to necessarily say some of them are players, but when you're talking about taking your $15,000 card, setting it down on the table, shuffling it, and using it, I'm not going to say people don't do that, but it's just, you're less likely to want to do that if you own those type of cards. These are more likely people who keep their cards in a binder, a safety deposit box, whatever. Um, and there also are a lot of cards in Magic that exist solely for the purpose of collecting. It's just a lot of people don't know about them. It's very niche, but I am super deep into that part of Magic collecting. Where I started getting into maybe 6 years ago was I just through a number of different things. I basically maxed out my Magic collecting as far as what I was interested in collecting. I got into collecting all of the rarest printings. I did financial experiments with all of them. Some of them turned out okay, some of them didn't turn out that well. And then I ended up owning some of the rarest printings of Magic cards, which are called Summer Revised, which is a set of cards where an uncommon card, there's only about 120 of them that exist. A rare card is about 60. So when we're talking about like a extremely, extremely rare cards, right? Well, I got 5 of them, and I started to collect the cards that I had. If I like the card Shattered, for example, is the card that I collect now. Was one of the cards that I got from that set, and a lot of people in the Magic community, they call it global set collecting, and that's where you pick a card. And in Magic, even though a card has a specific name, it does a certain thing. It has multiple printings, and those printings a lot of times don't have the same art. So I don't even know how many art printings the card I collect has. Probably like 12 or something, and the physical sets that is printed is way more than that, especially if you count like secret printings and things like that. But anyway, so I started out kind of doing that. I just started collecting all the regular cards, but then I ran out of regular cards to collect. And then what's left after that? I mean, well, I guess technically I kind of collected all the foreign foils, but I found that to be extremely tedious and kind of pointless. People complete those collections, but they're so outrageously expensive to collect and time consuming and tedious, and you have to talk to all these people in all these different countries. And I don't have any problem doing international business, but it's just exhaustive. I mean, you getting the Portuguese cards are only available in Brazil, and the Russian cards are extremely, extremely, extremely difficult to get at all. And there's other printings as well, old Korean cards from the 90s. But anyways, I could go on and on about it. But anyways, I do collect the foreign Magic cards, but I decided not to collect the foil cards because I found that to be too tedious. So what I ended up getting into is the more rare cards, like the misprints and things like that. Now, in Magic and Pokemon, we have this thing which is really funny because in vintage non-sports, these are like the least desirable cards possible. But you guys call them like banner cards or something. In Pokemon and Magic, we call them NFCs, standing for non-factory cuts, which mean they're cut from whole sheets of cards, right, by hand, typically. Now, the reason why we like these cards and we were willing to pay more for them in some cases, well, a lot of times people intentionally cut them like miscut on purpose. The other thing is, they will also, so people who collect miscuts and stuff, and some people don't know the difference, but some people do. But the other thing is that a lot of times, they don't give out a lot of uncut sheets of these cards. So when someone cuts one up, even though it's a piece of a sheet, it's a piece of something that's extremely rare. It's a 1 of 1, a 1 of 2, a 1 of 4, whatever, 1 of 6, whatever it is. But anyways, it's astronomically more rare than a regular card. So that's the main reason why we value them. Now, I have no idea. Banners are obviously probably not that rare in vintage non-sports, but it's just funny to me because that's something that would potentially have value in a TCG world. But anyways, it's so through my misprint collecting is how I actually got into this in a roundabout way. But the thing was that also, I guess I didn't talk about this either, but I was buying and selling Magic cards for a while at that point when I got into collecting errors. And the Wizards of the Coast, the company that prints Magic cards, has been bought out by Hasbro. I don't remember how long ago that happened, but they've been taking the game on a terrible trajectory, and they're also mass printing a lot of cards. And the main thing it used to be is you used to have what I used to call like a 2-year safe zone, where they really would almost never reprint a card within 2 years. So you have 2 years to make money off a card, and around the 2 year mark, you'd want to sell your card to make maximum profit if you were planning on selling the new cards. Um, so, anyways, since they basically eliminated that as a potential business plan for somebody who used to not own a card shop, um, I had to switch to something else. And I was already collecting these cards, and I found out they were worth money early on. But I bought some cards from Portugal, and people, I think I made $170 worth of profit in a couple of days or something. And I was like, oh, there's a lot of potentially a lot of money in this, and if you can find them and stuff like that. But but anyways, I all right, sorry, I'm rambling a bit here, but try to keep this video somewhat short. It's probably not gonna happen. Again, this is my second attempt. Who knows how many attempts I'll be, but probably not too many. I'm not really a self-conscious person, so I'll probably release it relatively unedited or as it is. I don't really care, but I just don't want to waste people's time listening to my rambling thoughts too much. That's my only real concern. But anyway, as I was talking about the air collecting getting me into vintage non-sports, so this basically became my side hustle, selling misprinted Magic cards. Because you were able to get the cards for a price that you could sell them for a profit fairly easily. The main ways, a lot of the decks came out fully miscut. You could get one of those decks fairly, well, I don't say cheap, they're hundreds of dollars, but you could take one of those decks, you could break it into pieces, sell the individual cards, and you could make a profit fairly easily. And then the other thing you could do is you could buy collections of misprinted cards from shops. I split a couple of very large ones with a guy from Michigan. But anyways, that ended up being the space that I got into as far as selling. And again, I'm not really sure the first time it happened or how it happened. I noticed this guy in Singapore selling some weird, like, Lord of the Rings or some other random misprints of other things. He was allowed to sell them in one of the groups, and there was some of them were selling for fairly decent money. And I think that's probably what piqued my interest in it. And I don't honestly remember any idea what I first started getting, but I know I was able to sell Garbage Pail Kids miscuts and like Batman 1966 miscuts and like a few other things. Maybe like double printed like baseball cards or something. But like that's how I started my journey into collecting the vintage non-sports stuff, is because it was for financial reasons, honestly. But I ended up with stuff that I couldn't sell, right? And I think I had gotten, as actually not this particular copy of the card that's in this binder. I have another one somewhere, but it was the Rocket to Krypton from the 1966 Superman set. I know that was one of the ones. I think I paid like maybe $10 for that one, and then I might have spent like $15-20 on a Mars Attacks card. And I found out those were relatively unsellable after I got them. The people in the Magic community are unwilling to spend more than maybe like $7 at maximum on something that's not a Magic card. So, well, unless maybe it's Pokemon, but it's few and far between. It's very hard to get more than that. So I focus more on the cheaper cards for resale, but I became more interested in some of these things. I started picking up a few extra copies here and there, and I got most of these from one person, actually. These set of connectors. But anyways, but that's how I got introduced to it, and then as my exposure increased, I was not spending a lot of money on stuff, but occasionally I would spend $10-20 on a card. It's interesting to me, these have been relatively unsellable for me. I thought that vintage horror would do well in a Magic misprint community. There's even people who collect like horrors and different like scary monsters and stuff, but for whatever reason, I really struggled. I might have sold maybe one. I don't know. Again, there's weird nuances that even I don't understand for some of this stuff. But but yeah. So anyway, so with the global set collecting, I think the thing there's some potential to cross to people who do that, to cross into vintage non-sports like I did. Now they may not do it through the errors and misprints like I did, but they may do something similar. Like if somebody collects like the card Shivon Dragon in Magic and they achieve every single Shivon Dragon that they ever wanted to achieve, and they don't really play Magic anymore and they don't really collect other cards, they finish their collection, they don't really have anything left to do, and they don't really want to collect another Magic card, they might decide they want to collect George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or Batman. So I think there's some potential for that sort of collector to exist in the future. But and also the other thing about those Magic collectors is those Magic collectors are the people who have money because they've already spent thousands of dollars on a single card, or even $10,000-$15,000, to complete their collections. So, I think there's a lot of parallels there. And then the other thing too is specifically with Magic is that the people that are doing the global set collecting, they are also doing international. They're doing international commerce. They're buying all the international language cards. They understand the rarity of language. So there's a lot of parallels there, right? You have your foreign printings of stuff, of your Batmans, etc., and that's worth more money, and they will understand that concept and grasp it. I think that might be a little more tough for the Pokemon collectors, but I'm gonna get to that in just a minute. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have on the subject of Magic collectors that is relevant to vintage non-sports. I don't think so. I probably will think of something. I'll probably circle back to, but I'm going to try not to circle back to too much stuff in this video. Pokemon. I'm going to break out the Pokemon binder for this part. So, the thing is, Pokemon is also similar to vintage non-sports, and I would say there's one key aspect that's even more. With, like, the global set collecting, there's an extremely small number of people, Magic collectors, who do that. But with this type of collecting, a lot of Pokemon collectors do this. I would even say a majority of Pokemon collectors do this. And this is what they call master set collecting, which is very, very similar to vintage non-sports. You take a card, or in this case, 2 cards, and you just try to collect every single printing that there is. Just every single one. Now, some people will get into the foreign language cards. Now, with Pokemon, that's pretty tricky. But it is with Magic too. But if you're going to do either one, you really have to know people in foreign countries. You're not going to be able to do it by yourself. And I'm not even trying. This is my Pokemon collecting is very amateur, and also I don't care about it very much, quite frankly. I'm not super into Pokemon cards, but I like them. I think they're cool. But like, I'm much more into Magic and vintage non-sports and other things, even sports cards, personally, as far as like my own interest. But just for me, Pokemon is FOMO. I just think if you're big in the card scene and you do multiple different types of cards, I think it's unavoidable. You have to have Pokemon cards. Now, who knows if it's going to continue going as crazy as it is, or if any of these things are going to continue going as crazy are, including vintage non-sports. But, obviously I think a lot of the people who are in the know and people who talk about these things, we all know a lot of the collectors are in this space. We know that there's more potential here than there is in a lot of other places. And I think that also may become attracted to people, especially if the Pokemon market becomes more sour than it already has become this year. Now, the Pokemon market, for people who are not aware, is going through a slight downturn. It's nothing serious. Scalpers are still able to make some amount of profit, just not nearly as much as they were. And then specifically this set, Perfect Order, is basically unscalpable now. But it's still, if a Pokemon theory, that set will be worth a lot more next year, especially sealed. But anyways, that's really not super important. But so with Pokemon collectors, I think there's a lot of things that tie them into vintage non-sports. Like I said, the one thing was the collecting of a specific Pokemon. The other thing is the graded cards. Magic collectors don't really care about graded cards all that much. They're really more into raw cards, binders. But again, at the highest levels of Magic collecting, get a little bit into graded stuff. Sometimes for authentication, sometimes for the grade. But it's becoming more popular as Magic becomes more like sports cards. the sports card like cards tend to get graded. Your serialized cards, your extremely rare foil cards. Anyways, um, but yeah, but Pokemon has the grading, and then there's a niche community of Pokemon graders that actually want to get the low graded cards, the ones they actually like. It's like a contest for them to see if they can get a one, because with newer age cards, obviously it's much harder to get the lower grades, unless, obviously, like, unless you destroyed your own cards on purpose. But anyway, I mean, I don't think that's super important here. But another thing is, the other crossover I'll make is that vintage Pokemon, the vintage cards, those people are, now modern Pokemon collectors, it's 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, just like sports collectors. They only want to see 10s, maybe a 9 occasionally on an extremely, extremely rare card, but mainly just 10s. But as you get into the vintage Pokemon, there's more people, if you're looking at a card, the raw value of is $3,000, a 3 or a 5, is going to carry a premium. So the vintage Pokemon collectors are already going to be familiar with that as well, so that's not going to be a foreign concept to them. Now, the other thing also is that there is a fair bit of crossover between sports and Pokemon, and Magic and sports. So, well, I don't even necessarily want to say Magic and sports. I think there's not so much, but the collecting aspect is staying. Because right now we're in a situation where the collecting aspect of Magic is actually more like modern sports than Pokemon is. Because Pokemon doesn't have serialized cards. I would say they do kind of have, like your Kaboom or whatever you want to call it. They have something kind of like that, but it's a little different. Anyways, but yes, but I would say there's more parallels between Magic and modern sports than there is in Pokemon and modern sports, even though there's more crossover between Pokemon and modern sports. But anyways, the other thing also I will say on the misprint and miscut front is that the most crossover I see between all of the different types of cards coming together all in the same space is in the misprint community. Because a lot of these people, they collect Magic misprints, they collect Pokemon misprints, they collect Yu-Gi-Oh misprints, they collect Flesh and Blood misprints, they collect Disney Lorcana misprints, they collect Garbage Pail misprints, they collect Marvel, 1990s Marvel miscuts, right? They collect Star Wars miscuts or whatever, some combination of multiple things. But even I was in early on, even in a sports era group, which is, again, that's not something that's super popular either, but you got your miscuts and such in that group as well. And that group, again, I see a lot of crossover between these other groups. A lot of these same people are lining up in all of these different misprint groups. So there is definitely a lot of exposure to that. Also, I don't remember whether I said in this video or not. I think I did, but I have a friend in Australia who was actually ahead of me in this. He had started collecting vintage non-sports back to the 1800s in Australia for misprints and miscuts, probably even 5-6 years ago. I don't know when he started, but I don't think he said, like, I've spent. I bought a Batman rookie, and I've now just bought Luke Skywalker rookie. So I've spent a fair bit of money on. And that I think I spent $100 also on something graded in my safe, maybe. I don't know. But I've spent at least $100 plus on at least 3 cards in vintage non-sports. And I don't really know a lot of other era collectors that are willing to do that. Now, I do know, like, one of my friends, Shane, he has a miscut Nasty Nick, obviously from Garbage Pail, and that's pretty significant card, But, like, I wouldn't, that's probably his one card, So I don't know. I don't know how, like I said, I don't know. With the misprint people, they seem to not be willing to spend a ton of money, but they do have interest in any of these old sets if you can sell them cheap enough. But anyways, the other thing I would say is that for me also, some of the cards that I buy are just crazy rare for, like, what I'm able to pay for it. Like, an example of that, like, is Horrors of War, 1938. I just got this card this past week, but, like, this right here, I mean, I know that, like, Horrors of War is pretty I mean, it has a lot of registration errors, but like this is like an S tier registration error. Like this is like, I don't care, like I said, even in a set that has a lot of registration errors, like this is quite extremely rare, and I just paid $2 for this card. So there's definitely not, I mean, vintage non-sports error collecting and misprint collecting probably has the furthest to go out of any error collecting or miscut collecting that there is. Now, I don't know what potential future it has, and for me, I don't really care. This is just my collection. I don't really intend on selling a lot of these cards. I'll probably sell some of them, when I start stacking up the same set and I'm not collecting that set. I fill up my binder or whatever, I'll probably sell a couple of them. Like I said, as long as they're cheap enough that I can sell them to the Magic collectors. But yeah, I mean, I'm at the point where like a lot of this is just for myself, and maybe some of it's gonna be a financial investment, and maybe it's not. And I do own some non-misprinted cards for that reason. Not many. I have an extra rookie Batman and a couple other cards, but so yeah, I was gonna also talk about reselling and how that applies to both hobbies, but that's gonna definitely have to be a whole other video. This video is definitely going on long enough.